a little.
Oh, move the mic up a little. Should I start over, you think? Well, I want to tell you a story that happened that illustrates exactly what I was talking about what people have, people can access for themselves that really is a game changer that is overlooked generally by the field of mental health and psychology. I was sitting on a plane traveling from Seattle to New York, and I happened to be sitting next to a psychiatrist who was a head of a New York psychiatry department. And I found that out as we began to talk a little bit. And I asked him a question that I was very curious about, because I always thought of psychiatry, because he was a Freudian, it's a process, and you gradually, hopefully the person will get better over time, but it looked like not much happened during the session. That was just my view, that there was a free association and the psychiatrist would make comments. So I said to him, Bob, I'm very interested in this question. Is there ever a time during a session when you can see a dramatic improvement in the client? So you're having the session and all of a sudden you would say, oh my word, that client is really onto something here, and there's a change happening here. And if that is the case, what does that look like in the psychodynamic model? What would that look like? He said, well, George, it doesn't really work that way. I said, I know, that's why I asked the question. I asked if it ever happened. He says, well, yeah, I once had a client who was free associating, and all of a sudden he sat up and he said to me, oh my God, I'm feeling towards my boss the same way that I felt towards my father, and I'm treating him accordingly, and that's really messed up. That's really messed up. That's a little crazy. And Bob said, I was really taken aback by how effective he was by his having that realization. Because really, that's what the whole thing about projection and transference and countertransference, the very essence of it is that you're seeing someone else through what's going on in your own mind, not what's actually happening. And this person saw that clearly in real time. I said, well, let me ask you something. Would it have been a much more leveraged session if that client started seeing that happening all the time in his life, not just with his boss, but if he began to see the fact of projecting your own thinking on others across the board, generally in his life? He said, oh, that would make a huge difference. But I don't see that happening. I was surprised that it happened as strongly as it did in the session, George. I mean, I really don't see that would happen. I said, well, let me suggest something. I said, this is just between us girls sitting here on a plane talking. This won't go any further than us, so I'm just experimenting. You went to graduate school, you went to medical school, you're an expert in psychotherapy, psychodynamics and Freudian therapy. So much so that you're head of a department at a university. So you must know a lot with all the work you've done on projection, transference, how it happens in the human experience, that we all, project our own thinking onto others and think it's them, and how big a problem that is, and how deeply seated that is in people, the tendency to do that. Why don't you just share your expertise with your clients? He said, well, what do you mean, share my expertise? You mean teach them to be Freudian therapists? I said, no, just share the fact that human beings project their own experience on others. They think that their experience is coming from what other people do, and in actual fact, it's just their own thinking projected out there onto the world. So I could do that, but I seriously doubt if people would understand that, particularly troubled people. I mean, after all, George, I went to medical school for God knows how many years. It took me all those years to figure out. I said, no, but it's an observation that anybody could have. I mean, if that guy could have it, why couldn't anybody else have it? It's just and you gotta remember that these people that are sitting opposite you have been living in that experience of life. They've been living in projecting their own realities on others, and they've been doing that as long as they've been alive every day, 24/7, even in their dreams, they do that. So how hard would it be for them to recognize that for themselves? Well, at this point, if I wanted to use technical terms, I would say he got very defensive. So that last comment did not go very well. It told me how good he was and how many years he's been doing it. And I said, no, I know. I'd like to talk to you just as a human being, just us girls here on the plane talk. Don't you think that any human being could recognize something that every human being does all day long? He said, well, a troubled person could. All right? If I'm working with a neurotic or someone who's, doesn't like his wife, but, I have troubled people. How would you expect a troubled person to be that philosophical and that reflective? Now, I was impressed that he saw this as philosophical and reflective. I thought that was extremely cool. I said, well, wouldn't you say everybody has their lucid moments? He said, well, not really troubled people. I said, I was at a psychiatric hospital. I was doing the grand rounds, or what I like to call the brown rounds. They didn't like that at the psychiatric hospital. And I was sitting at a table, and someone brought that subject up, and I asked, because I said, well, do your patients, because they were all inpatients, have lucid moments? And at first they said no, and later they said yes. Every person at that table said, yeah, I have never seen a patient or client who didn't have a lucid moment. As a matter of fact, if you look closely, one of them said, if you look closely, every patient will have a lucid moment at least once a day. And that was news to the rest of the table. So I said to Bob, look, not only do people have lucid moments, but you have to wonder whether deep inside of people, there's some kind of a knowing that can be drawn out or triggered. I said, to use an analogy, you have to ask yourself, is there a freeze-dried understanding of life inside of people that comes out in those moments of spontaneous remission, that comes out in those moments of insight when they're working with a therapist? You have to ask yourself, is that the therapist doing that, or is that something coming from the person? And if it is coming from the client, doesn't that represent a potential? You with me so far on this? Well, bless his heart, he got very quiet and reflective. He said to me, So, you're suggesting that theoretically, people could write their own ship no matter how troubled they were. Theoretically. I said, well, if I wasn't afraid of losing your respect, I would say that. He says, well, that would turn the mental health system upside down if that were the case. I said, well, I think it's worth considering. Not necessarily that it's the end of therapy, the end of the profession of therapy and counseling. But can we be more of service? And is there a way that we can leverage what we're already doing with someone, independent of our approach? Whether we're doing a 12-step, whether we're doing psychoanalytic, whether we're doing a cognitive behavioral, is there the addition of an educational component in there that could trigger people's innate understanding of life and kind of wake them up to it? And if we did that, wouldn't that make the process go a lot stronger, a lot faster? Okay, you with me on this first story? I haven't put anybody to sleep yet. That's story number one. And the second one, I'll tell you, and then I'll take some questions. The second story actually is about my mother and my brother. My brother actually is here, sitting in the middle there. But when my dad died, maybe close to a year later, my brother Jimmy called me up and said, really worried about Mom. She's doing terrible. She's doing worse by the day. She's just so deeply in grief, you can hardly talk to her. And is there anything that you can think of to help? So Jimmy was recognizing not only that I'm her son and his brother, but that I do this for a living. I'm a semi-professional. I'm a good person to ask, is there anything that can be done? And I said, oh, I'll tell you what can be done, Jim, is I will come back east immediately. So I came back, and I spent some time with my mom. And then my mom and I were riding in the car. Now, I remembered that when she was at her having dinner at her facility, there was a moment when she lit up. Someone came over to her, and I saw her light up. And then, as quickly as it happened, it was gone. But that meant to me that there was some help there, even if it was for a tenth of a second. There's a potential there. So we were in the car, and I said to her, hey, Mom, let me ask you something. I know how hard you're grieving for Abe. Would you say that sometimes you're grieving more than others? She said, I'm grieving all the time. I said, I understand it. But would you say that sometimes it's not quite as dark and quite as painful as it is at other times? She said, oh no, it's always dark and painful to the same degree. It's no, absolutely. I said, well, you know that woman, I think her name is Roberta. I noticed when she came over to your table, you lit up a little bit. She says, well, I really like Roberta. I get a kick out of her. I said, why wouldn't that be a time when the grief was a little less? She says, well, it was for that second. I doesn't happen very often is you have zero respect for it. You could care less whether you're feeling better. So what are you saying exactly, George? This is getting too complicated for me to understand. I said, well, let me make it simple. Human beings, spirits, go up and down like a roller coaster, like a sine curve. Now, sometimes the range might be really low, sometimes it might be really high. But it's in the nature of people that they think different, they feel different, and they experience different. Not every half hour, but every minute if you look closely. She says, so you think that the grief, sometimes I'm happier than others. I said, that's exactly what I'm saying. And you're saying that everybody's that way. I said, yeah, I'm saying that. Every single person, 4 billion people on Earth, all 4 billion, that way. They're like a kaleidoscope. They're a changing experience based on what goes on in their mind. And this is the best line. This made my day when she said this. She says, you're saying that this been happening to me my whole life. And I'm 86 years old and I haven't noticed it. That's what she said. This has been happening my whole life, and I'm 86 years old, and I haven't noticed it. I said, well, Mom, apparently that's the case. She says,
good answer.
don't you think that makes me, that would make me awfully stupid? I said, well, if it makes you awful stupid, Mom, you're in really good company. Because your son makes a living pointing out that and other facts of life for human beings. I make a full-time living pointing it out to people, and some of them are even older than you are. I'll tell you something. It changed everything. I'm not saying that she walked around clicking her heels, but I'm saying that my brother Jimmy will tell you that her range on a go-forward basis was high. She simply was not grieving at the levels that she was grieving at, and she was actually enjoying herself and knowing that she was enjoying herself on a go-forward basis. She still suffered under the yoke of her grief and the loss of her husband, who she was with for over 50 years. But it was a game changer. More important than that's great. More important, she had a learning curve, and she did not have a learning curve before my visit. She had a decline curve. She was getting worse over time. When a person realizes a fact about the human experience, just recognizes it for a second and sees it for themselves, the penny drops. No matter how much it affects them, they're going to have a learning curve, and a learning curve is worth its weight in gold. A learning curve is the best thing that can happen to a human being. Once you have a learning curve, you can forget about that as a problem, as an issue, because you have a learning curve. And a learning curve means that power of understanding that I mentioned inside of people, the intelligence inside them, has been hooked in, has been connected to in this regard. And that intelligence will start to manifest itself. A month later, a year later, 2 years later, they'll have improvement, even though they did absolutely nothing to improve their plight. So I'm going to use a personal example, and then I'll take some questions with my wife Linda and myself. ever since we were married, she told me that I was overbearing. And I couldn't imagine what she was talking about, because it seemed to me like I was very open-minded. It seemed to me like I listened to what she had to say, and it seemed to me like I was responsive. It seemed to me like she got her way more often than I did. That's the way it seemed to me. And ironically, she said to me, well, yeah, you do get your way. I do get my way more often. You do listen. We do have discussions. You are open-minded, but you're overbearing. You're like heavy-handed when we talk. I had no idea what she was talking about. Then one time I was with her, and all of a sudden I felt this tension, and I got this kind of head of steam, and when I opened my mouth to talk to her, I heard this harsh tone, and it surprised me, and I thought, I wonder if that's what she means by overbearing. And she said, yeah. Well, from that time forward, it continually improved on its own without any effort on my part. So, a person learns something, either personally like that, or more importantly, about the nature of life. And it provides the water for the freeze-dried understanding that they have. So the understanding that they gain provides the water, and then they have learning curve. Now, I could give you 20 things that are as leveraged, as important as what I taught my mom. You know, that we have rules. You know, there's the fact that people get caught up in their own feelings. The state of mind gets really dark. When that happens, they're completely incapable. They become incompetent. Me too. And the fact is that everybody gets over that. Nobody's terminally that way. If a person knows that everybody gets over it, it's easy to get over it. If a person doesn't know it, it's hard because they're frightened by it. So there's all kinds of experiences in life that are very easily explained, very easily understood. If you see them for what they are, it's easy. And if you don't, they frighten you and you get stuck in them. So this is just I just want to give you a feel for it all. And then I was going to ask you if you have any questions about what I've done so far. It changes the receptivity enormously. So if I have a client, for example, and they, let's say this is a business client and they tend to be dishonest, straight up dishonest. That's why the bosses send them out. And I say to them, well, you know, Michael, I'd like to talk to you about honesty. It's not going to go very well. You see? But if I say, Michael, you know, there are times when people feel under pressure to say something that they wouldn't ordinarily not say. So they might not say exactly what they think of something because they feel like the consequence is great. And despite their best efforts, they misrepresent themselves. And I don't know a human being that wouldn't raise their hand if I said, have you ever done that? What about you? you say, would you be one of those people that raise their hands? They'll always say yes. And there's some kind of preparation that goes on for people once they look at a human fact of life rather than something about them. So one of the things that I talked to Bob about was that if you were to talk to people about projection and transference and how we put our views, you would want to talk about it as a phenomenon about life so that they wouldn't take it as an accusation against them. So the most important things that you would want to talk to people about are things that are so generalized that there's not an exception in the human race. It's true for everybody. And just discovering what's true for everybody takes a little step back. Because true for everybody means there's no exceptions. And I would say that in my work with people, and Linda's work with people, and people who, go about things the way we do, that's what we're interested in. What is there about the human experience that is common, that everybody would recognize if they saw it, and few people see it until it's pointed out to them? That's our area of expertise. That's our stock and trade. What is it that everybody does that makes a significant difference mental health-wise, quality of life-wise? Unlikely that the person you're sitting opposite to will have recognized that phenomenon before you explain it to them. Making up some universal facts about human beings. And I thought I would share those with you and then show you the implications of that. Okay, because we have plenty of time here. So, I hope I can remember them all. I have them up on, I have a PowerPoint that I can put up there that will remind me of it. The first one is this. And these are things, they're not things that you have to do. They're things that you're already doing. And every human being on earth is already doing this. They just don't know it. This is already happening. That's the beauty of it. It's not like I'm saying this is what you should do. The first one is getting over yourself. Like everybody in the course of at least most a day is going to get emotionally adversely affected by something. They're going to get upset. They're going to get annoyed. They're going to have an emotional reaction. And when you have an emotional reaction, you get into a state, you might call it. Yeah, I'm in a state now. Okay, so I'm saying everybody in this room, including myself, is going to have this happen at least once a week, if not once a day, and sometimes once an hour. So, I doubt if some of you are.
What time is it?
I don't know what you're talking about. So the first thing is to realize that it happens to everybody. And when it happens to you, you're simply not yourself. And you're not yourself in a very consistent way. So for me, when I lose my bearings, that's another way to say it, I get very intense and very condescending and kind of rolling my eyes. And so that's what happens when I get that way. Other people, there's different things. So the first thing is to realize is that it's not front page news. This is what happens to everybody. The second thing is everybody gets over it. You see, so if I get that way at 9 o'clock this morning, and you come 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm not going to still be in a reactive state. For some people, it takes less time than others. Being in a reactive state is not terminal. just comes and goes. And then, as soon as you get over it, I can't believe I made so much out of that, it was ridiculous. Well, at least I know better now, so that'll never happen to me again. It doesn't. I'm saying, if you, in your heart, deep enough, understand that emotional reactive states will have a learning curve. But what will happen is, you'll recognize that you're in a state quicker. You'll remember that it's not terminal. And just that alone will make it come and go quicker. So a month from now, your emotionally reactive states will be less of a problem than they are right now. That will continue indefinitely with no effort on your part. So every time you go through an emotional state, you'll learn from it, and you'll get better at it. That's really what it boils down to, is you get good at it, you get good at going through it. If you don't understand it, don't accept that that's part of the human race. And you either take it personally or blame it on others. It doesn't matter which one you do. I assure you, it'll get worse over time. No, another emotional state, I can't believe it. So it tends to either get better or worse, and the difference is, do you see it for what it is? That's it. So I'm saying that if you're working with someone, and out of that comes the fact that they recognize the fact of emotional states, they recognize the fact that they're not terminal, that's going to help them. Now, if they see what's behind them is simply what's going on in their minds. That's all that's happening. And we can talk about that before the day's over, more specifically. That really helps people. Put up that slide, because I forgot, that show, Taxi. And there's no more a deplorable person on that show than Lou DeMont. So most shows have a deplorable person in it. But if you talk to someone that's been watching Taxi for a year, they're fond of him. And originally, they hated him. How does that happen? They change their mind. People can change their mind. So if you drive across town, you go to a restaurant that has these wonderful ribs, and talk to your friends about it, so now you got a car full of people, and you get there and they say, we're out of ribs. The question is, how good are those 4 people going to be at changing their minds? If they don't change their minds, they're going to have trouble enjoying their meal. So how's your chicken? Well, it's not as good as the ribs. How's your fish? Well, it's good fish, but it's not good ribs. So, those 4 people, if you were going to bet on how much would they enjoy dinner, you'd be betting on how good are they at changing their mind. Now, probably those people don't think it has to do with their mind. They think it has to do with their taste buds, or it has to do with the restaurant. They just don't see it as, I didn't change my mind, and that's why I'm having a lousy dinner. You see what I'm saying? But the fact is, people do change their mind. If you look back at what you thought when you were 17 years old, there's a lot of things that look different to you now than they did then. That means you changed your mind. The possibility, like when I learned this, when I'm talking to you about, the possibility of a person changing their mind was a game changer for me. Because it meant that I could like all the people I hated or didn't like. It meant that I could enjoy the movies that I didn't enjoy. It meant that I could change my life by changing my mind. Change my quality of life by changing my mind. The fact that that's a possibility is a game changer. And if a person goes further and says, you know, all things considered, I wouldn't mind enjoying my life. You know, if they went that far, then changing their minds would happen more often than if they didn't. If they didn't do that, you might say, well, why would a person not say that? Well, they would say, it's not up to me. It's up to life. Doesn't matter what I think. But if they said, I can't change my mind, I will change my mind, it happens without any effort on my part, first of all. Second of all, I'd like that. I know people who enjoy almost everything, indiscriminately enjoying their lives. And I used to think they didn't have a clue. I would always think, why don't they get up and smell the coffee? Now I'm thinking, I wouldn't mind being that way myself. Those two together is going to give you much nicer life. Does that make sense to people? And I'm not saying that they work at it or they have a technique, and they don't have to do anything, just a recognition of the nature of the mind, how the mind works, the nature of life. That's what the nature of life is. Everybody thinks they blew it on their deathbed. Everybody. Everybody on their deathbed says, I can't believe how I blew it. There's so many things, so much I could have enjoyed life more than I did. So changing your mind is a very powerful thing to understand that we have that capacity as human beings, and in actual fact, we put it to practice. And the more we understand that as a fact of life, the more it comes into practice. So that's the second one. Now, I made these I could have made up 30 of them. I just did these because I thought they'd be good ones for this particular. This is my New Hampshire. I'm doing something in Vermont in the spring. You won't see anything. Having new thoughts. Now, here's what I mean by having new thoughts. Human beings get things out of the blue that they never thought of before. That's what I mean by new thought. Something that you never thought of. And it can be a huge thing, like the nature of life, or it can be a very small thing. Like, I'm going to give you an example of a really small thing. And this is a confession. I wouldn't share this with a lot of people, but not in Vermont. But I use moisturizers, face products, things like that. And I use more than my wife does. More than Linda does. And I was thinking about travel, and I didn't know how to deal with the fact that one time I was traveling and I ran out of one of my face products. I thought, well, how am I going to deal with that? Because do I have to check every time in the bottles? You can't tell how much is in there, except how much they weigh. So should I check every time and see whether I'm running out of something? And then I thought, well, I don't know how long it takes. If it weighs this much, how long can I go for? So I have to factor in the length of the trip.
Oh my God.
So after a while, my head was a buzz. I couldn't figure. I was in over my head. Okay. And I was in over my head so much that I gave up on it. I said, oh, it's an insoluble problem. It's not like the theory of relativity. They solved that. This one here. So I totally gave up on it. And when I gave up on it, it was out of my mind, and mind was free, and I suddenly thought, you know what? Every time I reorder one of these things, I'll put the one I reorder in my toiletry kit. So my toilet kit will always have completely full face products. I thought I was a genius. How did I come up with that? It's so simple because I do reorder. So I thought, wow, that's great. Bring on the theory of relativity and the era of Israeli crisis. I'm ready for it all. So that's an example of something that I get a big kick out of simply because it was a new thought. And with a new thought, you always have a thought, why didn't I think of that earlier? Now, new thought is the secret, a secret to mental health. The capacity for new thought is the hope for mental health. People say, oh, the hope. Well, new thought is the hope of humanity. New thought. The answer is always in new thought. Now, humanity doesn't understand new thought, the fact of new thought, generally speaking. So they're trying to make it with the old thought, reprocess it, redesign it, recombine it. That's generally what happens. If you don't think so, just look at the news. The solutions they have are all solutions that have been tried before. They need new thought. See, but people don't know that there's new thought. Honestly, they don't. I'm not going to use the person's name, but I was at a conference in this understanding that we're talking about here, and a former really high person in APA came to the conference, and we were thrilled because we were interested in what he'd say, what he'd see. And I was assigned to him. I was like his escort. When I went to the conference, and I talked to him afterwards, and I helped him make the choices about breakouts and stuff like that. And we were at a sitting over lunch, and I said, do you have any questions? He says, I don't understand why the speakers don't have notes, don't read from notes. Why don't they have notes that they're reading? I go to a conference, I read what I'm saying. I mean, if I stood out there without notes, I wouldn't have anything to say. I said, well, we'll call him Bill. I said, Bill, they talk from new thought. They talk off the top of their heads. They have nothing on their minds. And things come to mind, and then they're telling you what comes to mind. How do they do that? I said, everybody does that. What do you mean, I don't do that? I said, are you telling me that you never have something come to mind out of the blue? Well, I do, but not that very often. I said, well, they do that often. Okay, they do that often. He says, and he got really tight. He says, I don't believe in new thought. There's no such thing as new thought. That's ridiculous. Every thought comes from memory. It's just a reorganization of memory. When I get a new thought out of the blue, it's not out of the blue, it's from my memory. I said, well, what are you talking about? I said, what about music? What about, isn't there new thought in music and creative? Well, you know what he told me? He said, he says, that proves my point. There's only a finite number of notes. And all it is a reorganization of those notes. That's what music is. Isn't that refreshing? That's all it is. I said, well, that's true. I said, you could also say that there's only 26 letters in the alphabet. And Hamlet is simply a different organization of those letters. He says, George, you took the words right out of my mouth. Now, the not believe in new thought. It feels like everything is our memories reorganizing the experience. In a world where there's no thought, it's a whole different feeling about life. It's not very interesting. And worst of all, there's not any hope in it. So the conditions of today look like the conditions of tomorrow because there's no such thing as a new thought. And that's why throughout the centuries, people who have come up with new thoughts have had considerable resistance. I saw an article on how all it took for new thoughts to get respected. For instance, in the Navy they have terrible scurvy, and some British naval boat accidentally discovered that if you eat lines, you won't get scurvy. That's why they call the English limeys sometimes. Okay, so that happened. How many years did it take for limes to be standard issue in the British Navy, which was the leading navy in the world? How many years do you think it took? 3 years? 5 years? Anybody have a guess? 100 years? 1 year? 200 years?
Still haven't done it?
500 years. You know how many people died of scurvy in 500 years? This is the British Navy, the leading navy in the world. Well, why is that? Because it's the world has not recognized the capacity for new thought. And they don't know, they don't like that it exists. They have trouble dealing with it. That's why computers took so long to become mainstream. So any human being that recognizes new thought as a fact of life, and everybody has new thought, and new thought has tremendous power and leverage in the world. The deeper you recognize, not the more, the deeper you recognize it, the more new thought you'll have, the more respect you'll have for reflection, clearing your head, having nothing on your mind. The more thought you'll have, the more you'll be a problem solver, the more you'll enjoy your life. The fact of new thought, just discovering, oh man, as soon as I get a face product, I put it in my travel bag. I got a kick out of that. There's an inspiration that comes with new thought, no matter how minor the thought might be. So that's a fact of life. Everybody has it. Humanity doesn't understand. What is the root cause of divorce? Who can that fourth one? Human beings do not understand until it's taught to them that your experience of life is subjective. It's never objective. It's subjective. Just as if you paint a picture, let's say you stand in front of a landscape and you paint a picture, and you are an unbelievably accurate artist, and you paint that picture exactly right, so that you couldn't tell the difference between that and a photograph. Is that picture subjective? Yeah, it never gets subjective. In its nature, it came from the imagination and the mind of the person, and they just chose to do it as close as they could to. It never becomes actual nature. It's always a picture. It never becomes a photograph. You know? This thing is so accurate. It's a photograph. I'm going to sell it as a photograph. You can't do that. It's not a photograph. It's a subjective picture. Well, you and I as human beings, we are by nature
subjective because our perception of something and our experience of something is 100% aligned with our thinking in that very moment. And thought is transitory, and everybody thinks differently. So if you get 10 people that go to an art gallery and look at a picture, the same picture, this is tough, this is a stretch, so people have trouble with this, I'm going to just say, oh, I was just kidding. The actual picture that's on their eyeball, when they're looking at the same picture, the actual picture on their eyeball is different. It's different. Because their thinking is the thing that's how they get the picture, is they think it. The thinking is different. The actual picture is different. Now, in the world of psychology, people say, wow, reaction is going to be different. We're subjective, everybody reacts to that picture different. But the world of psychology is about, we see the same picture. I mean, come on, you know? No, not. That's why if you put there's a experience that I had where you put a collage on the board, on the wall, and you give people 2 minutes to look at it. And then you ask them to write down everything that was in that collage. By and large, every woman would see the baby, and every man would see the bikini woman. And the woman wouldn't have the bikini woman on there. Everybody would see a different collage. Well, if it wasn't a collage, it was just a picture, everybody would see something different because of the way they think it. And if you look at that person, you would see a pattern in the way they think it, no matter what it is. You see, so if they tend to appreciate the picture, you'll begin to see that there's a tendency to have appreciative views in life. Now, the fact that our experience is subjective, any couple that sees that and respects it, so they say, oh my God, my husband and I are working from a totally different reality. And that's just the nature of life. It's going to be easy for them to talk about things because it's going to look like they're dealing with intercultural issues. People are really good at intercultural issues. You go to a culture and they say, well, before you eat, you have to wash your hands. People will say, that's not the way we eat over in the U.S. Oh, okay, wash your hands. Probably good reason for that, to wash your hands. So when people have differences and they're from different cultures, they're kind of accepting of that. They understand it and they're patient and they're respectful to a large extent. Now, if it's 4 billion people, I'm saying it's 4 billion cultures. That's more difficult for people to accept. At the very least, they'd say, well, they should see it the way I see it, whether they do or not. So I know, like Linda and myself, when we were first together, actually throughout our marriage, we have a whole different view of what's wasteful. You see? So, to me, being financially wasteful would be going to an expensive hotel at 10 o'clock when you're leaving the next morning. I wouldn't be wasteful to Linda. What's wasteful to Linda is all the stuff that I buy and I lose. That's her definition. And arguing against that. I said, well, all the stuff like mine on Luz doesn't cost as much as all the hotels that we go to. But you can see how ridiculous that is because she just has a different reality. It means something to her to go and stay at a nice hotel, whether it's for all day or for night. That's meaningful to her. She enjoys that. And I enjoy being an airhead. I like being relaxed and not having to keep track of everything. So there's a plus side to it. Now, you could argue, well, that's a stupid plus side. Well, it's not stupid to me, and I'm the one that's doing it. And it's none of your freaking So, over time, Linda and I have a disagreement. And we remember, which you don't always do, that we're living in a different culture, and who knows what's behind her view. We have excellent discussions, most of which is an intake. So I would be saying to her, in the example I used about the hotel, Linda, talk to me about why it matters to you that we stay in a hotel, for 2 hours, really expensive hotel, versus staying less expensive. Why does that matter to you? But it's not a challenge, because I respect that there's going to be something that matters to her behind it, and there's going to be logic behind it. It's not going to be ridiculous. Okay? So I listen to her, and she says, well, George, the nice hotels have nice beds. They spend more money on beds. I didn't know that. All I looked at was the price tag. I didn't look at the bed. I said, so you get a more comfortable sleep? You do. She says, and they're more gracious. When you come to check in, they're more gracious. There's more goodwill. Well, by the time she got through telling me about why she likes the hotels, I was appreciating them more myself. So now I'm like her. I appreciate hotels. I appreciated nice hotels 5 times as much when I got through that conversation. You see, so now I've learned something. My respect is up. And now, let's say she asked me about losing stuff. Okay? And I said, well, you know how we change our tickets all the time? We pay all these change fees. And how Terry, our general manager, thinks it's so wasteful. It's a lifestyle. We like to be spontaneous. And if you have a critical mass of spontaneity, you end up with change fees. And she agreed. She said, yeah, I wouldn't give that up for anything. I said, well, that's the way I am. And being an airhead, it's a way of life. I don't think too much about things. And it gives me enjoyment to have my mind free. Part of the downside of that is losing things, having to buy them over and over again. But she said to me, which was fine, well, George, do you think you can have a free mind and do better about coats, for example? Coats are very expensive. So I can give it a shot. And I said to her, well, I'm fine with it. But I don't want to be going to $500 a night hotels for an hour. Would that be unreasonable? She said, oh, absolutely. You don't have to go to, the Ritz-Carlton every single time. Once the respect is there, and once the understanding of where the other person's coming from, to the point where you actually respect it, the conversations are very easy. And you work it out. Now, what enables us to do that? That 4th point. 100%. You don't get that 4th point, you can't do that. You get comfort, you get debate. Now, I'm not saying that Linda and I don't lose sight of that 4th point, because we do, absolutely. And when we lose sight of it, we have a tendency for conflict. how to work things out. But the fact that we know where our bread is buttered really matters to us. You know, this separate reality thing really matters to us. We know that that's where our bread is buttered. That's what will keep our marriage together for 40 years. And any couple that comes to see us, we're on that fourth point. And that fourth point leads to high levels of respect, high levels of openness. It really provides a platform for discussion, and it's a source of goodwill. So if we have a couple and we don't get that fourth point across, we feel like we should give them their money back. What's the point for working with a couple? Now, if you take these 4 points together, and you take an individual, and that individual, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, is an 8 on all 4 of understanding and recognizing the fact of those points, I would say their quality of life is going to be pretty good. What do you think? You're going to have a good quality of life. No matter what their circumstances are. I don't know whether, well, Linda, you think I should take questions of this, or do you think I should take an ambitious step forward?
What would be your ambitious step?
I was going to tell them the implications of all this.
What is your spidey sense?
I'll ask you, matters. Those are the 2 choices. I can debrief this, answer questions, or I can take an aggressive step. So raise your hand if you'd like me to debrief this and take questions. Raise your hand if you want me to debrief this and take questions. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do with the 2 people is I will take questions after we're done. I'll stay around a little bit and take some questions. But I'm going to go on. I'm going to take an aggressive step. Here's what I'm going to say. And this is, I'm making this up just for you. So, you know how I said a scale of 1 to 10, you get, if you're an 8 in those things, so you really understand those facts of life, this is the way it is. That's how the mind works. My job is to get aligned with that. Now, here's the scale. This is 10. 10. And this is an 8 here. This is a 6 here. And this is a 4. A person has a life of well-being without any effort. They're simply resilient. So anybody that's an 8, no matter whether they're a dentist, work in a warehouse, are in prison, no matter what their plight is, if they're an 8, they're going to be a happy camper. They're going to have the feelings they want in life. Okay? And if they're a 2, no matter how good their circumstances are, they're not going to be a happy camper. They're going to be unhappy. Is everybody okay with that? Doesn't matter what nationality they are, or how old they are, or who they're married to. People here generate good feelings, goodwill, joy. They're able to see enjoyment in what they do. They get over things fast. They
because of the number 4, they play well with others, as they say. They don't have as much on their mind because they don't, you know, they are able to smell the roses, solve problems easy with their new thinking, so they don't have to think about much. So they have a lot of new thought. They have a very nice life. People down here, say at a 4, don't get over things too fast because they don't get getting over things. They get changing things. That's their plan B. Don't get over things, change things. Okay? They really struggle with alternative realities because they think that realities different from themselves are simply wrong. People don't get it. Okay? They don't believe in new thought because they don't have much of it, and they don't notice it because they have so much on their minds. They're ruminating, solving problems, dealing with things. I don't want to bum people out with this explanation. I think you get the point, right? Now, here's the part of it that's most important in my mind. It might be the biggest stretch. If you take the gap, between, say, 4 and 8, you take this gap. People who have that gap are going to be looking for coping mechanisms. They're going to be looking, because they don't tend to generate these feelings that the person 8, 9, and 10 have. They're going to be looking for something that will give them a temporary good feeling. Which means that temporarily, it does those 4 things. It gets them over what's on their mind. It enables them to change their mind and start enjoying themselves. And it gets them to clear their mind so they have new thought. And they also tend to be very understanding and accepting. So you're just using alcohol as an example. Let's say a person's at a 4 and they really have a lot to process during the day. They have a lot on their minds. And they go with a friend, and the friend says, hey, you want to have a couple of drinks? Yeah, I don't normally drink, but they drink. And after an hour and a half, they got nothing on their minds. They got no problems. They got no rumination. And they say, you know what? I feel great. They're more tolerant. They listen better. It's a whole new world. See, they're living temporarily in the world of the 8. They love it. Now, you and I think, wow, there's a lot of downside to that, and they shouldn't be doing it. And, well, it's true, but to them it looks like there's a fork in the road. 3 hours of living as an 8, or 4 more hours of living as a 4. That's what it looks like to them. Every dysfunctional behavior in the human race is a coping mechanism for someone who's trying to find a temporary happiness. Even I worked with the kleptomaniac and a young boy, and he said that moment when I see what I'm going to steal and grab it and put it in my pocket is worth its weight in gold. I said, well, Roger, how long does that last? He says, not too long. It's maybe
5 minutes? I said, so 5 minutes, you put yourself at risk to being arrested and having your whole record changed and all that. He says, yeah, that's true, George, but you have no idea how good it feels. You wouldn't be disrespectful of it if you knew how good it felt. And there's a big gap between how good it feels and how good I normally feel. Now, in George Pransky's mind, if you don't close that gap, you're going to have recidivism. Because the person is going to be faced with that choice of temporary happiness or the same old feelings. The lower the level, the bigger the coping mechanism is required. Like a person who's a 7.85, all they have to do to clear their heads and feel good is go out and jog in the afternoon. Maybe have a cocktail. That's it. A good exercise program. Someone who's a 2 is probably going to be either incarcerated or institutionalized. It's just, they just have a hard time even finding temporary happiness. They end up doing things that are very extreme. Someone that's a 7, not so bad. So the coping mechanism will always be perfect for the number. Just not anything worse than that, not anything better than that. So theoretically, you could find out how unhappy a person is, and you could tell them a range of coping mechanisms that would work for them. This is a very interesting view of things because it really makes the DSM-3 a cataloging of coping mechanisms. That's another way to say it. That the DSM-3, if you want to become an expert in what coping mechanisms are, what the characteristics of them are, and what classifies them, look at the DSM-3. That's what I would say, based on this view of the human experience. And naturally, I like that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing that for 40 years. Well, now we'll see what kind of trouble I'm in here about the wave. Absolutely, there's a wave at every level. But the wave is tied to the level. So this person's wave is like this, and this person's wave is like that. So, but to them, it's real. So, like you go to someone that's an 8 and say, "Oh man, this is such a drag." This morning I got up and I was ruminating about my taxes. How am I going to pay my taxes? I don't have the money. Well, how long did you ruminate for? Oh my God, it must have been a half an hour. And did you have to go to your therapist or? No, I just don't like that negativity. And you ask this person, how was your high? I'll say, it was great. Nobody was bugging me. I wasn't freaked out half to death about the plight of my life. It's just fabulous. So everybody gets, this is like levels of consciousness. Everybody gets used to their level, and they still don't like the downs. But if they look back, they'll see that the downs are higher than the ups used to be when they were at a lower level. And you know the other thing that's interesting? If this person used to be a 4, and now they're an 8, they can't imagine someone living at a 4. Are you kidding me? They also think a 10 is totally unrealistic. So they're at a 10 now. They're feeling great. They have nothing on in their mind. They're fall in love with their mate, and you say, oh man, you've really got something going. Yeah, I'm living on borrowed time. This is just an oasis. That's not real life. Bernard King, the basketball player, had 3 games where he scored 40 points or more. And a sports writer said to him, wow, Bernard, you're on an amazing hot streak. And Bernard King said to him, there's a difference between a hot streak and taking your game to another level. Now, he took his game to another level. That was the beginning. Anybody that knows basketball, Bernard King was a 40-point guy for the rest of his career. If he was just in a mood, he would have said, yeah, hope that hot streak lasts another day. So there's a difference between going up and down, which we all do, and taking your game to another level where a much nicer reality looks very realistic and makes perfect sense to you. Does that speak to what you were?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, I just think that you brought up the two of somebody that is incarcerated or institutionalized. So,
Right.
In the context that we're here, a client goes into Farnum at a 2.
Yeah.
And throughout the process, becomes an 8 by the time that they leave.
Right.
But then they leave. How do you help them maintain that 8? Because you leave the clinical treatment setting, go back to life, go back to work. It's very easy to drop down, I think, to a 4 or a 2 and lose sight of what brought you to the 8. So how do you?
Great, I'd love to answer that. Did everybody hear his question? On this side of the room? I don't suppose anybody else is interested in that one. Yes. See, if I see a client, and let's say he comes in on Monday and he's at a 4, and he leaves at an 8, like you would stipulate. Okay. Now here's what I don't know for sure. I know that some of that is a contact high, because he's been in the presence, like with you and the Farnum people, he's been in the presence of a high-spirited person with a lot of goodwill. They're going to be affected. Their spirits are going to go up. Some of the gap is going to be, he understands something. He understands those things that you had on the chart. He understands how the mind works. He understands how life works. Now, to the extent that that gap of 4 is based on a contact high, it's going to be easy come, easy go. He won't go all the way back, but he'll go back to the extent that it was a contact high. In which case, he would need reinforcement. He would need to get more understanding to get himself close that gap. To the extent that it was, a jump in understanding, there's not going to be recidivism, because when he drops from an 8 to a 7, he's going to say, oh man, I messed up today. It's not real to him. I messed up. I don't know what's wrong with my head. Are you kidding me? I mean, I'm so negative. Now, you hear someone who's an 8 say that, they're telling you, this is bullshit. This is not really happening. This is just a state of mind. And they will bounce back. Now, if they drop back, and they say, oh man, I've lost it. Life is doing me, you know, there's a lot of contact high in their movement. Now, frankly, we don't know with clients which it is. We don't know the percentage of contact high versus understanding. But we have gotten some clues. So if they say, if we do a follow-up, they say, gee, George, I just can't believe how harsh I am with my kids. We know that they gained a lot of understanding, otherwise they wouldn't even see it that way. On the other hand, if they say, yeah, we got back and this stuff works great, except with kids, we know that there was a lot of contact high involved. Does that make sense? So that's part of our expertise. Another thing that's part of our expertise, if you go in this direction, is telling people that they're going to get used to a higher level of understanding and they're going to be intolerant of things. They don't realize how much they've gained. So for example, we had this couple come to see us from Los Angeles. And they had a very, very, very bad situation. So they came up with physical abuse involved. It was a nightmare. One of them's in jail, and the next week it's the other one. They came up, and now it's 3 months after they were in Wakanda. And they call up. The husband says, oh man, we had it made, and we lost it. The Wakanda trip was a complete bust. We thought we'd learned and we hadn't, and things are terrible again. Well, I didn't think that would be the case. So I said to him, well, Jason, so which one of you ended up in jail? What do you mean? Well, I'm assuming that you had one of your knockdown, drag-out fights, the police came to your house, and one of you ended up in jail. Oh no, we didn't end up in jail. But you did have the long knockdown, drag-out fight though, right? Well, yeah, we did. And how bad did it get? Did it get physical? Oh no, it didn't get physical. Well, did it get shouting at the neighbors? Well, no. So what happened? Well, it was a very, very intense argument. And how long did it last? Like, I remember before you came up here, there would be a knockdown, drag out for 3 hours, take a break, and do another 2 hours. So how much was it? Oh, well, it wasn't like that. So it was only 2 hours? No, it wasn't really 2 hours. Well, how long was it? Oh my God, it must have been 45 minutes. I said, Jason, so let me get this straight. You had a 45-minute argument, and you're telling me that things were as bad as they were before you came up here, when you were getting thrown in jail after a 5-hour fight, it got physical. He says, well, you make it sound like it's not such a big deal. I says, well, how does it sound to you? He says, like a big deal. I said, that's because you're healthier. See, like if you're physically healthy and you take a cold medication, it's going to make you feel really bad. But if you're physically unhealthy and you take a cold medication, it's going to make you feel good. So people get acclimated to this higher level and they have a very low tolerance for the stress they used to experience. I'm saying that's a good thing. It keeps them honest, right? Not good for them. They don't like it. So that's another thing we have to educate people about. When you go up to an 8 and you used to be a 4, a 6 will feel like a 4. Because you're in a different place. Any other questions or comments on either the list, or I'm very hopeful that you can solve the problem because you'll get over whatever it is that's making it look so problematic. And when you get over that thinking, it won't look so problematic and it'll be solution oriented. If you see the problem as having an independent existence that is not mediated by the mind, nothing to do with my understanding what I think, then you're stuck with an insoluble problem. Insolubility is in the mind of the problem person, the person that looks at the problem. The lack of solution is in the mind of the person. Now, once a person understands that, and understands that we get into insoluble states of mind, if you will, and that this is a part of life, and that too shall pass, and we can get over it, we can change our minds, and we have the capacity for new thought, all of a sudden your mind, you loosen up. It's psychologically. And when you loosen up, lo and behold, the problem appears more soluble. That's the nature of life. You get wrapped around the axle. If you take responsibility for it, you say, God, I'm wrapped around the axle. I couldn't tie my own shoes such as I am right now. That humbles you a little bit. You say, oh, geez, well, that's too bad. Relax a little, your mind loosens, your mind clears, and all of a sudden, you see a solution. And you say, gee whiz, I wonder why I didn't see that earlier. So there's no, there's nothing on this list that isn't mediated by understanding. Nothing on this list isn't mediated by understanding. If you could walk away from here and that seems true to you, it's going to have a massive difference in your life. Because the bad news is you'll feel responsible for all your issues. And the good news is you'll feel responsible for all your issues. Because as you understand the psychological nature of life, it empowers you, and you have a learning curve, and the learning curve makes all of this better all at once. And if you don't see it, then these things are going to get worse, because it's like you're driving the car. Okay, you're driving the car, and you think that the rear view mirror is what steers it. So you keep making adjustments. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And then someone says, well, the rear view mirror has nothing to do with where the car goes. It's not attached to the drive shaft. It isn't? No. Well, what is? The steering wheel. Is that what it's there for? Yeah. That's what the drive to. If you just turn that wheel, it'll affect your where you go. Now, you might not be very good at it, but you'll get better. Seeing the psychological nature of life is the steering wheel. That's what's steering your life, is what's happening inside your mind. Does that make sense to people?
Yes.
It's not an easy point, but it's something that if you look in that direction, that's a good thing. Okay, I'm going to move on, and I'm going to tell you